Netanyahu has a nuclear plant, he has tanks and F-16 fighter planes and other weapons, but he needs the help of settlers. Our people and government should learn from that. We, the Palestinian people, have nothing, and if a Palestinian fighter wants to pick up arms, the Palestinian Authority will not allow it.
The training supposedly to disperse possible Palestinian demonstrations after the Palestinian leadership attempt to seek statehood recognition at the United Nations later on this month. The settlers are already armed with automatic and semi-automatic weapons.
They are the terrorists, not us. They attacked our houses, and when we are not at our houses, they take our lands. They cut down our olive trees. We have a field of fig trees in that area, around 200 fig trees in our land. The settlers cut them all down.
In addition to the training and supplying of weapons to the settlers, Israeli occupation forces set up 2 lines around settlements near Palestinian villages. The first, if crossed by Palestinian demonstrators, will be met with tear gas and other means for dispersing crowds. At the second, the red line, if crossed, would allow Israelis to open fire at Palestinians.
This is a very dangerous step, and this is peel the ideology of the Israeli government and the military, that the settlers is not something separated from them. They are part of the tools that they are using against the Palestinians in solidifying the occupation. And now they come to a step ahead with this, to make them an organized army and military, not even military by saying, and by the word is more than it's militia, organized militia that they were using to exploit the situation with the Palestinians. So this is a declaration of the war against the Palestinians.
Although the settler attacks on Palestinians increased dramatically during the past few months, Palestinians fear that the attacks by armed settlers would increase even more, if not after the state bid, then during the olive harvest season, when the Palestinians head to their olive groves, which are areas where illegal Israeli outposts and settlements were set up.
The next war will be caused by the settlers in order to implement the transfer policy in the Palestinian lands. They will use replacement, the replacement of settlers in the place of Palestinian villages and rural areas, so that these Palestinian areas seem to be isolated islands in a large sea of settlements. The Palestinian people have a right to defend themselves with the same weapons that we are killed with. Palestinian people have not excluded the options of self-defense.
Palestinians fear that once their leadership tries to seek recognition of a Palestinian state at the United Nations, that Israeli settlers protected by the occupation forces will viciously attack Palestinian villages and towns. But the Palestinians will turn that fear into resistance. For Remember Palestine, Hanna Kassis, Occupied Ramallah.
My next guest, well, she doesn't need to read a report to know what the situation was like aboard the Mavi Mamre, or to wait for media stories concerning the plight of the Palestinians, because she lives and breathes justice for Palestine every single day. Good to see you again, Sarah. We've got a lot of reports coming out about the findings of the Palmer Uribe report on what happened aboard the Mavi Mamre. From the leaked excerpts, what are your initial responses?
Well, I have the major response I want to make is that this report was constructed. It was designed to ease a rapprochement between Israel and Turkey. It quite clearly has not done that. It has failed in that aim. It was obvious from when the report was first constructed that due to the panel on the report and due to that being the remit of the report, that it was never going to actually look at what really happened, and certainly wasn't going to look at the legal implications. That was done by the UN Human Rights Council report, which made very clear guidelines that the siege on Gaza was illegal, the naval blockade was illegal, the attack on the Freedom Flotilla was illegal, the killing and the torture of the civilians who were on the flotilla was illegal. And so we have all of that already. This report really is a smokescreen that's being used by Israel to try and justify illegality and criminality.
You mentioned there that the situation has deteriorated between Tel Aviv and Ankara. Where do we stand? What's the latest as far as you're aware?
Well, the Turkish government are obviously issuing very strong statements, calling for, obviously, the apology that they want, for justice for the passengers who were killed, and also pointing out that they have a right to implement international law, and they have a right to accompany flotillas with humanitarian aid to Gaza. They are also looking at going to the International Court of Justice on looking at the basics. Why do people go on the flotillas in the first place? The only reason we go on flotillas is because Israel is committing this horrific offence against 1.5 million Palestinians who they have trapped under siege in Gaza. And so they're wanting to go to the ICJ to get a ruling on that, to make it clear that what Israel is doing is collective punishment and is illegal.
We know that we won't read the full thing until early next year, perhaps. But what would have been perhaps surprising if they'd come out and said what, Sarah?
Well, the New York Times had leaked the report, which looks like the complete report. I think what was surprising for me was, even given the composition of the committee, it was impossible for Israel to get away with a report that did not point out that on the panel, Israel was unable to justify why it had killed people on the Mavi Marmara. It pointed out in the report that Israel used 308 bullets, and that's one for every 2 passengers that was on the Mavi Marmara. Those were live bullets, obviously, and so it was critical of the disproportionate force that Israel used, and the killings of the passengers, and also of the treatment of passengers whilst when it was taken over by the Israelis illegally. One of the things that I find often does not come out. It came out in the UN Human Rights Council report, but the part I saw of the Palmer report claimed that Israel had said that it processed the wounded properly, and I was sitting in there.
You know that not to be the case.
I timed it. I looked at my watch when the calls from help came from the Mavi Marmara over the Tannoy. The Israeli forces saying we have seriously injured, we have dying people here, we need medical help. Those started at 5:15 in the morning. The attack was obviously in dark.
How long did it take?
It took an hour and 3/4 for the first passenger to be removed from the saloon for medical treatment. And we've heard subsequently the stories of those people who were injured who did not receive medical treatment. They were kicked.
We're going to leave it there, Sarah, on that rather distressing note, because it's an issue that's going to play out. But before that, Turkish activists, well, as we heard there, they paid the most serious price after 8 of their citizens and 1 Turkish American were killed aboard the Mavi Marmara when it was stormed by Israeli commandos in May of last year. Since then, Turkish relations with Israel have been strained, with an official downgrading of diplomatic ties announced recently. This report brings you the latest.
In the light of recent tensions between Israel and Turkey, following the leak of the UN report on the attack of the flotilla Mavi Marmara, the Prime Minister of Turkey will be visiting Gaza in the next fortnight. Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan's visit to Gaza could be seen as further deterioration to Turkish-Israeli relations, given his close ties with Hamas.
Turkey will take all measures which it sees as necessary for the freedom of navigation in the Eastern Mediterranean. Turkey does not recognize Israel's blockade of Gaza. It will secure the study of this blockade at the International Court of Justice.
The hostility between Turkey and Israel has increased since the UN report on the attack to flotilla Mavi Marmara, where 9 activists were killed by Israeli forces in May 2010.
We in the Hamas movement consider the International Committee report about the flotilla unfair, unbalanced, and giving the Israeli occupation the chance to escape from its responsibility for this big crime, and to our regret it gave legality to the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip.
In spite of the UN report expected to be published in February this year, the document has not been officially released. UN representatives refused to make comments on the leak to the media.
Now, against the backdrop of the Palestinian statehood bid at the UN and a leak of the Palmer Uribe report into the Mavi Marmara, tensions are running high. Just what will be some of the next steps in this unfolding drama? On more on this issue and the surrounding legal implications, we're joined by Andre Bumza from the Free Gaza movement. We're getting legal here. We heard a little bit of what Sarah had to say about the contradictions between the UN report and now this subsequent report. We haven't heard everything from the new report because it has been a leak, but from what you know, what are the contradictions?
The contradictions are huge. First of all, the Palmer Uribe Commission found that the blockade is legal, blockade of Gaza. The Human Rights Council report said because a humanitarian crisis exists in Gaza, the blockade is illegal. The Palmer Uribe, and we call it the Uribe report because we want to emphasize that on that political panel was a well-known human rights violator. That makes the whole all the findings of the commission questionable, of the panel questionable. But the Palmer Uribe Commission isolated the naval blockade from the overall closure policy of Israel. That's the first time that this has happened. The fact-finding commission mission of the Human Rights Council took it as part of the overall closure, and so has the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, so have most other international experts. And this is the first time when the naval blockade has been separated out. Then the Palmer Uribe panel found that this naval blockade distinguished from the overall policy of closure was legal. The Human Rights Council report found that it was illegal. Therefore, everything that flowed from the interception, that the interception was illegal, the interception of the flotilla, and that everything else that followed, the use of force, the detention of passengers and crew, the appropriation or destruction of property, all of that was unlawful.
Where does it leave the victims? Because clearly if the report is saying, one is saying it's illegal, one is saying, well, you know, if we separate the two things, then it makes it legal, depending on where you go.
A contradiction about that also. The Palmer Uribe panel didn't deal with the victims at all. It doesn't call for justice. That was never their purpose. It was a political panel with a political purpose. Purpose was never to get justice for the victims or to figure out what violations of international law occurred. So that it leaves the victims out in the cold. On the contrary, the fact-finding mission of the Human Rights Council found that there were all kinds of violations of criminal behavior towards the victims and said that the victims have a right to justice.
A missed opportunity on some of these things. Will the pressure from Turkey, very quickly, Audrey, make a difference?
Oh, I believe so. What Turkey has stated that it's going to do is go into the International Court of Justice. If you have two conflicting, totally contrary reports from UN agencies, the only way to determine what the state of the law is would be to go to the World Court.
We'll leave it there. Now, of course, it's critical for the Palestinians to know they're not alone. Across the globe, activists are reminding Palestine and her supporters that they keep fighting together for justice.
A wooden chair has become the new symbol to represent the Palestinians' bid for statehood and their full membership at the United Nations.
Today we built a Palestinian chair, Palestine's seat in the United Nations, made by Palestinians. We attached a key brought from Jerusalem to the box to ensure the right of return, and I hope we will get full membership in the United Nations.
As the discussion at the UN General Assembly gets closer, Palestinians join efforts to push their international recognition as a state. The wooden chair covered in the blue colour of the United Nations will be sent on a world tour until it reaches New York. The chair, unveiled in Ramallah, is part of various campaigns taking place around the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem al-Quds. From the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo, the Palestinian ambassador Ibrahim El-Zeben unveiled the Palestinian State Now Committee with the support of local lawmakers, union leaders and activists. An initiative that aims to increase international efforts in favor of the Palestinian cause ahead of the UN General Assembly.
The best would be for the United States to at least not use their veto. Now they are under much pressure because in